So Bright Data, you recently carried out a survey, I think investigating issues around the topic of environmental, social and corporate governance, or ESG data as we know it. I guess to start with, it'd be nice to know why you carried it out. Why do you think it's important at this moment in time?
Yeah, sure. So we've seen from our customers, and our customers are largest companies in the world collecting web data through our platform, that they care. They want to know. They invest more in how they see, analyze, understand ESG on their own businesses, and in many cases also in businesses that they want to acquire or have an interest in. So, and one of the sources to understand ESG in a company is to look also outside of the company, not just on the internal information and reports and so on of the company, but also what's going on outside of the company. So once we saw that this is a thing, we conducted this survey to try and understand ourselves and then to help educate others what companies think of ESG, how do they react with it, what they do about it.
Okay, and you mentioned obviously investors are very sort of interested in what they're investing in these days, but I guess business partners also want to know the kind of companies they're dealing with, and I presume even the general public. Okay, there's a lot of publicity about companies that are give their green credentials, but I guess again people want to be able to make their own minds up rather than be told necessarily who's doing what. Is that so? There are a lot of interested people when it comes to this sort of ESG data. Yes.
Yes, and I think that the broader story here is that generating positive ROI with a dollar sign is not enough anymore. You see it first with investors, but then you also realize that everyone thinks the same. Maybe because investors, this is the path they're taking. So achieving a positive ROI on my investment as an investor should be both from the financial perspective, but also from the impact point of view. It's not enough to just have a high return on the dollar from the financial side, but actually have a negative return when it comes to ESG and ESG related areas. The world got much smaller, I think. In the past 2 years, everyone went digitally to the digital environment as individuals. And you can't ignore the impact of the business on the way we live our lives anymore. And ESG is like the gist of it. It's pretty structured way to understand if this is good or bad business, not just from the financial perspective.
And also, I'm guessing some companies are interested perhaps in whether it's within their own industry sector or more benchmarking maybe against another. So the idea of comparing yourselves against, let's say, either your competitors in your particular industry or just seeing how your industry is doing maybe against some of the others. Is that a valuable sort of proposition around ESG data as well?
Oh, that's very true. And much of the data is actually openly accessible on the web. So it's hard to compare yourself and benchmark yourself to another company, which you don't understand what's going on in that company. But today, a lot of the data is just open on the web. We have recently started working, for example, with Suva Climate, which is an accelerator that supports several startups in the climate change space. We support them in creating a large and public database for sharing several green objectives, such as the number of electric cars purchased in the UK every month. That's public information. And when you're able to collect it, then you can conclude from this database on ESG related issues, also sometimes to benchmark yourself. Maybe I'll add another point, a few numbers from the interesting numbers about that from the survey we conducted. So just under a year ago, what we talked about, we ran a survey looking at US and UK based businesses and found that over 3/4 was 76% of their organization's investment decisions are impacted by ESG factors. It was 67% roughly in the UK, very big numbers. And 80% of the survey respondents who are at the most senior level of their organization stated that ESG is already incorporated into all business strategy decisions. So that's not like a vision to happen. That's here, it's already happening, and in large numbers.
And in terms, I mean, you referenced obviously a specific inquiry there around electric cars, being sold in the UK, but are there some fairly common ESG data sets that everyone is interested in, or does it very much vary, what industry you're in, what you're actually trying, what you're specifically looking for? How does that look?
That looks like anything and everything. The beauty of web data is that you just have to turn on your creativity. It's the same data that is out there that can serve different companies or different entities for completely different conclusions or insights. Most organizations are looking for environmental data. I think that's also the trend, so you can see it. And our survey also illustrated that with close to 70% popularity of environmental data data sets, but also diversity-focused data was very popular, as well as corporate governance that wasn't left far behind. When it comes to investments, a lot of organizations and finance organizations especially are in the lead. They're looking for ESG performance data. So we saw in the survey that 95% of those surveyed even said that they look at those metrics before partnering with vendors that can help them understand other parts of the business. So I think it's clear to say that ESG is on the rise, and there's a never-ending formula of what you can do with data to support your ESG goals. It's really just taking the raw data and looking at it from different angles.
And in terms of where you can get it from, I mean, you've alluded to some of the places, but I'm guessing organizations themselves, they do, their corporate reports, probably environmental reports, their own websites have lots of information. But then we've got, I guess, the governments of respective countries pump out sort of stats, industry sectors maybe do stuff, and then, as you alluded to, just websites, social media. So there is a heck of a lot, shall we say, of information sources around ESG data. Yes,
exactly. And I think that's the interesting part. So you can learn a lot about the company, obviously, from digging inside the company's information and data. That's actually a must. That's a must. What we bring to the table, or the DaaS company, data as a service company, is the completion of the full story. What other people thinks of the company, what the surge in a price of the product that this company is one of the suppliers of this product says about how they treat ESG. It's a variety of things, of endless mountains of information that you can use to get these insights on the company. So it's a mixture, and I think a healthy mixture of internal information that you can get only from inside the company, quarterly reports and things like that, with the external data that is out there. You just need to understand where to look and how to collect it.
And in terms of, I guess, the major challenge, bearing in mind potentially the size of the data out there, is the sort of accessing it and collating of it. And I'm thinking that sort of data collection analytics software has a major role to play in that process.
Yeah, so that's actually the challenge now. First, to understand where the data is on the web, that it's relevant to you, and then on the other hand, just the pure technological side of how do I collect it in mass scale, how do I put it in a format that everyone can understand and conclude from it, and understand, extract the insights from it. It's a bit vague until you actually try to do that. Just one example, I kind of touched on it in the previous answer, but just from looking on prices of specific products on an e-commerce website, you can get some incredible conclusions and insights on other third-party companies that seems to be unrelated at all to that product, but maybe they are. So let's say that you look at the prices of bleach on e-commerce website a long time, and you see that the prices are going up, And then you look who are the vendors of the chemicals of the most popular bleach. And that's a company that you are looking at. One of the vendors is a company that you're looking at from the ESG perspective. You can somehow understand what's going on, from a completely different level of interest. That they're probably earning more because the price of bleach is going up. Are these earnings going into diversification of the employees? Is it going to, contribute back to the environment that maybe they're hurting while consuming the chemicals and things like that? So it's really trying to think creatively on data that everyone can get. Just need to understand that it's correlated with the ESG of a completely different company. I hope that was clear.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I'm guessing alongside as with a lot of IT stuff, it's possible to automate up to a certain extent, but I guess you also need some skilled staff, whether it's to frame those initial queries that you then go and look for the data, or when you get these data sets, as with your example just now, to correlate apparently or fairly unrelated data sets and then bring them together to come up with some useful information. So how what's the situation around the skill? We're told there's less and less skills available for more and more IT tasks. Or what's the situation around the sort of ESG side?
I think that you nailed what the main issue is, and that's exactly the main issue. I think that ESG is already a thing. People understand that. Companies understand that. They want to cooperate and be like the most compliant possible, and the most ESG in favor of ESG, but they don't know what to do. It's you have the regular stuff. You can analyze how much flights I take, how much cars I have in the company, things like that, if we're talking from the environmental point of view. But there's so many things you're missing, and this is the main issue. You need the software, the tech understanding, as well as the expertise to best leverage the data that is out there and make it work for you and your company. And using the right data will definitely help you reach and exceed your goals faster. But that's exactly the point. You need the skill set inside the company, or the good advisor that can help you from outside the company to understand where to look, how to look at it, what insights to try to extract, and so on. That's a challenge right now.
And in terms of clearly you can look for any ESG data sets and do whatever you want with it. But do you think for a lot of people, they're doing it to comply, I guess, with various requirements, whether it's, I say, their ESG reporting and stuff? Do you think governments need to get more involved in maybe coming up with some common standard sets of ESG data that everyone can work towards, as opposed to at the moment maybe it's a bit of different companies have slightly different approaches and value different data sets in different ways?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see it in many things. So every time that there's like a new standard that comes into play, some companies try to embrace it as fast as possible. Some companies just wait for the governance or regulation to come in, which is also fine. But until the regulation starts to play, or there's like clear government guidance, it's chaos. Even if you have all good intentions, it's chaos. So all parties should partner and dedicate greater investment in building and enhancing the data infrastructure, in my opinion, that can allow you to be more ESG oriented. For example, this could include support to grow markets of data intermediaries and development of central data repositories, strengthening and expanding banks of open data sets that everyone can use for the benefit of everyone. All in all, there's a lot more to do, and not only the government needs to do that, or the regulator, but the faster they'll come into play, the less chaos will be. And regulation usually is good. It's always behind the technology or the commercial companies that run always faster, but it gives you these guidelines or guidance that you should have, at least for yourself as a company, to understand what's good, what's bad. If that's in the gray area, at least I know that's a gray area, and I can react accordingly.
Do you come across, or do you think there are companies out there that are still perhaps a little reluctant to share some of their ESG data? I guess, they're a little bit defensive, but as you've alluded to there, the idea of sharing it for common good. I'm thinking particularly, say, around environmental issues at the moment, climate change. If everyone's sharing, pooling information, it might be very helpful, towards working towards solutions. But I say, do you find some companies a little bit nervous or suspicious of being too transparent?
Of course, and that's also, by the way, shown in the survey. The majority of business leaders, it was 76%, recognize the value of their generated data and already make it available. However, there's always a hesitance from a significant number of businesses leaders, especially we saw it in the UK, where businesses are more apprehensive about sharing data with environment researchers. In fact, it was 24% of UK businesses that reported there would be a possibility of them sharing data, but would need to know more information first and better guidance from the government before they do that. So, and this was opposed to 11% of US businesses that said the same thing. But it makes sense. They're not saying, no, we don't want to share it. They're saying, it's all new. Help us understand better what's going on, and then we'll be happy to do our part, which makes sense. It kind of correlates to the previous point of, more guidance and governance and guidance and regulation is required to make it a real thing that everyone will comply with.
Okay, so there's to say there's a lack of transparency and trust is perhaps a little bit harsh, but there needs to be more of that. And you think government or governing bodies, I suppose, whether it's industry bodies or governments, or whether it's the EU, etc. You think those are the sort of organisations that will drive the wider acceptance? People will trust what's required, and therefore sort of join in, participate in a much better way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the solution, not just for that, but for everything, is always transparency. That's what we do as a business, just helping other businesses understand what's going on. That's what transparency is. If we wish to reach our net zero targets, data sharing, having researchers access data from across the business is key. How else would we know where we stand? It's all about transparency. This is exactly what the startups working with Subek, for example, the same accelerator that I mentioned, are doing with the help of public and web data, which they get in this case from us. But it's all about transparency. And when everything is out there, transparent, you don't even need to think what it means. There will always be other creative, smart people that with the same data that they can see, because it's transparent, they will figure it out. They will invent something new. They will, make this progress that everyone needs. So it's everything is open, transparent, public. That's always the solution.
So, if I understand it correctly, the technology is there to sort of do what's required, but it's changing the mindset. And your organisation, for example, is what you do is provide that technology base, whether it's the actual sort of IT solution and the skills to go around that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And there are also other things like, again, the governance and regulation. Just, people need to know you should do that. This is the framework for how to do that. And it's okay. It's okay because it will make the world a better place, because X, Y, Z, and so on. And that's the responsibility also of the governments. But the technology is definitely there. We can see from our survey, at least, that the motivation is also there. It's just at the beginning. Time needs to pass, like in everything that is new. So people will feel more comfortable and natural with ESG as a concept, and new employees are joining the companies, so they already know ESG from their first day. It's not like more veteran employees that it's new for them. And, you're moving from organizations, so ESG is a thing in this organization and also in the next organization. So it's just a matter of time until it will be embedded in every business daily operation, in my personal view. But from the technology point of view, we're already there, I think.
And in turn, I mean, if Bright Data, if you have a typical customer, are they aware of what they need to do, and they sort of focus on a particular aspect of the business, you know, ESG wise, and go there and then roll it out? Or do they sort of try and do it all at once? What is, yeah, as I say, what are your customers wanting from you, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, well, so usually they know exactly what they need when it comes to commercial aspect. When it comes to more ESG data, they kind of more narrowed usually in their thinking, just because it's new. This is where we can, you know, help expanding the thinking, and, you know, sharing what others are doing with us in this aspect. Maybe it will fit also your needs as a customer. But so it's usually, unlike in the commercial world, it usually starts with a more narrow goal. But once they, I would say, they taste how the data can help them achieve their narrow ESG goals, then really the skies are the limit, and they just keeps expanding it because it helps, it works. I mean, they get the answers to the questions, they understand what's going on, and then next time they'll need to answer an ESG related question or theory or a challenge, they'll go straight back to the public data they need.
Okay, so I mean, maybe as we finish, if the folks watching this and they're aware of, you know, their ESG obligations, they know they need to get better at, you know, finding relevant data sets, exploring it with their I guess their sort of supply, yeah, the supply chain, etc. I mean, it's quite a daunting prospect, I guess. Are there one or two bits of advice you would give them as they're looking at it, rather than go, oh goodness me, I'm going to leave that for next week because it's a little bit stressful? What can you break it down into, the sort of things they can start with easily, and then, you know, build up a sort of ESG, comprehensive ESG data approach?
Yeah, I think that the answer is always start small. So start by identifying the data points you need first. Don't go far with your thoughts. Just write what you really need for that small first iteration you wanted to. Then test your theory, even manually, to check that these data points that you were able to obtain really work for your business. You got your actual answers. It's not just, it didn't take you in the opposite direction just because you didn't really understand what data you need to obtain. Once that is done, then you can scale up. So it's like everything new. You start small, usually manually, just to check the hypothesis, the theory. And when you think that you nailed it, then you can scale up. And usually you'll do that with technology, with automation, and so on. There are many data-driven solutions to help you make what seems like a big time-consuming task to a task that simply takes minutes or even seconds and can get you the quality data you need that you can rely on. But again, start manually, small, then expand, scale with automation.
And maybe just the final thing, where are we on this sort of ESG data roadmap? Again, for people, do they need to panic and think, oh, we've already missed the boat, or we really need to catch up? Or is it still early enough, do you think, in where this is going, that if you start now, you will very much, you know, catch up, or be, you know, if not leading, at least, you know, well in the middle of the pack in terms of what you can do? Yeah, so just some idea of the roadmap.
I think that it's extremely early in the process. I think that, I mean, it's being discussed for a couple of years, but so maybe there's an impression that it's happening all over the place, that everyone are, you know, on it. That's not the case. If you start now, just understanding it, thinking it small with one thing, and then another thing, and then the third thing, you'll probably be one of the leaders, actually. I think this is how we say it. So we get a lot of traction from customers that, you know, want to be in it, but it's still just, you know, the tip of the iceberg. And every day we learn something new, how you can leverage data to win on ESG. And every time it's like, well, wow, that's, if we learn this today, how much we still don't know. So it's just in the early beginning.
Brilliant. Well, it's been lovely to chat to you today. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot for having me.